So I don't know if all of you've heard, but Queen Elizabeth II passed away. So I would just like to salute her. I think she was quite extraordinary. Um, she spent most of her life, 70 years, offering service to sentient beings. And whether you agree with everything she did or said or not is another thing. But I just feel she did her best. And let's make a prayer in our heart that she has a fortunate next life where she can continue to cultivate the good heart and all the other positive qualities and continue to, yeah, develop the potential, the Buddha nature potential for enlightenment. So, um, today I would like to share another story about Mahaprajapati from the book The Woman Who Raised the Buddha by Wendy Garling. So, for me, this story is very interesting and also quite significant. So, the story is about a golden colored robe, although some versions mention there were two robes. So, it's not sure if there was one or two, but anyway. So Mahaprajapati offers these robes to the Buddha during his visit to his hometown, the first time he came back to his home after his attainment of enlightenment. And he was staying in this grove, the Banyan Grove, with 500 of his monk followers. And part of this story is in the Pali Canon. For example, one of the sutras in the Majjhima Nikaya. And just to tell it in brief, so Mahaprajapati brings a new pair of cloths to the grove and offers them to the Buddha and says that, that she herself spun and wove these cloths especially for the Buddha and asks the Buddha to accept them out of compassion. So instead of accepting the cloths, the Buddha asks her to give them to the Sangha, saying, when you give to the Sangha, the offering will be made both to me and to the Sangha. But she tries a second time to offer the cloths to the Buddha, and a third time. And both times the Buddha responds in the same way. He refuses to accept them and asks her to offer them to the Sangha instead. And then he goes on to give a talk about different kinds of offerings and the different amount of merit that's created by these different kinds of offerings. And so the point is that he wanted Mahaprajapati to create as much merit as possible, and by offering the robes to the Sangha, then she would be able to create more merit. And the story ends there. So nothing is said about where the robe came from, nor what happened to it after that incident. But Wendy Garling, the author of the book, did some research and discovered some, I think, pretty wonderful stories about these robes. So, first of all, about the origin of the robe. After Prince Siddhartha left home, as we heard last time I told a story, Mahaprajapati was very unhappy and cried a lot and felt a lot of grief. One of the ways she dealt with her grief was to make these robes. And it was considered at that time in India that offering robes was a very significant and wonderful gift. And also the robes were made of cotton, which, we think cotton is just something ordinary, but in India, cotton was considered a very precious type of cloth because it's very light and very cool, especially in the heat of India. And it said that she was involved in the whole process. So first of all, the cotton seeds, she soaked them in milk to make them particularly soft. And then she, planted them, and then she harvested the cotton when it was ready, and she spun it into thread, and then wove the cloth herself. And Wendy Garling comments that this is actually quite extraordinary because that kind of work was normally the work of lower caste people. You know, spinning and planting and so on was done by low caste people, and she was a high caste person, and on top of that, a queen. But it seems that she really wanted to do all these different parts of the process herself. But my guess is she probably had help. She probably had lots of servants helping her. And some accounts say that the robes were embroidered with gold thread and were extremely beautiful and precious. So then when the Buddha finally came home and he was staying in the banyan grove, she went and tried to offer the robes to him, and he refused and so forth. And it seems she was quite unhappy because she, really had it in her heart to make these robes just for him and offer them to him. But, following his instructions, then she tried to offer them to the Sangha. And she started with the most senior monks, like Shariputra and Modgalyana, but they also refused to accept the robe because they felt they were not worthy of such a gift. And so she had to go down all the line of the monks and trying to offer the robes to each monk in turn, but none of them would accept the robes. And finally, she came to the very last monk, the junior most monk, who was still a novice, and his name was Ajita. And he accepted the robes out of humility and then offered them back to the Buddha. And he draped them in the Buddha's hut, the Buddha's residence. One was a canopy, one was a curtain. And after he did this, the Buddha showed his approval. And then he made an announcement to everybody assembled that this novice, Ajita, will become a lion among the conquerors, a Buddha by the name of Maitreya in this very eon. That part of the story just gives me goosebumps. I'd never heard that before, but I have heard that Maitreya Buddha is sometimes called by the name of Ajita, which means the invincible. And it's also in the long mantra of Maitreya. It's part of that mantra, Ajita. And so Wendy Garling comments that this outcome of Mahaprajapati's robe making and offering was really wonderful for her. She said nothing could be more marvelous or auspicious than her robe being given to the future Buddha. And she also, the author of the book, also found some stories about what happened to the robe afterwards. And so apparently the Buddha kept the robes with him for the remainder of his life. And then just before his parinirvana, he entrusted them to Mahakasyapa, who he had designated as the guardian of his teachings and of the Fourfold Assembly. And the Buddha asked Mahakasyapa to give the robes to Maitreya when he comes in the future. Huh? Now, how's he going to do that? Okay, so the story goes on. After the first council, after the Buddha's parinirvana, they had a council of the arhats. And so after that, Mahakasyapa transferred the Buddha's legacy to Ananda. And then he went off by himself into the mountains around Rajgir, it says. And using his miracle powers to break boulders, he climbed up to the very highest peak of this kind of mountain range, and then put the golden robe over his shoulders and entered into a deep state of samadhi with some kind of vow, like he would remain there until Maitreya comes. And the mountain miraculously split open, sealing Mahakasyapa inside. And there he sits, waiting for Maitreya to appear. And this place is actually a pilgrimage site known as Gurupada. Our friend Venerable Pema just visited there, was it last year? a couple of years ago. Anyway, sometime not too long ago, she visited and she has some photos of this place. It's quite hard to get to. It's way up, and there is a really deep crevice that you have to walk through. So yeah. Okay, so then the story continues with a prediction about what will happen in the future when Maitreya does return. So Maitreya will be in the world and he will encounter a large number of doubters, people who have a lot of pride and arrogance and are unable to accept that Maitreya is enlightened and unwilling to listen to his teachings. And so Maitreya will lead these people up the mountain to where Mahakasyapa is. And reaching that place, he will snap his fingers. The mountain will split open to reveal Mahakasyapa still sitting there, meditating with the robe around his shoulders. There's various accounts about what happens next, but the one I like best is that Mahakasyapa will come out of his samadhi, his meditation, and then stand up and then go in front of Maitreya, kneel down, and offer him the robe. And seeing that, all these doubters, all these doubting people will be humbled, their pride will be vanquished, and they will gain faith in Maitreya. And then Mahakasyapa will perform a couple of miracles and then disappear into space. His mission accomplished, he enters nirvana. So my guess is he's probably already an arhat, and now he's entering nirvana without remainder. And then Maitreya will lead the crowd to a nearby tree, and everybody will sit down, and he delivers his first discourse, explaining, just like Shakyamuni Buddha, about the Four Noble Truths. So you might find this story hard to believe, especially the part about Mahakasyapa meditating for I don't know how long. I don't know how many eons it is before Maitreya is supposed to come. But there are similar stories. So, for example, the 16 arhats in the meditation hall, we have statues along the wall behind Shakyamuni Buddha. There's statues of the 16 arhats. There's also a picture of them on the wall. And so the stories about them are that they are meditating in various places like caves and mountains and islands and so on, remaining in the world in order to preserve the Buddha's teachings. And I looked it up online and found something that says that the Buddha personally selected the 16 arhats from amongst his disciples and requested them to remain in the world, protecting the Dharma for as long as beings are capable of benefiting from the teachings. They vowed at the time of the parinirvana to remain in the world and maintain the Dharma until the time of the future Buddha Maitreya. So those beings, those 16 arhats, are also said to be meditating in a state of samadhi, in a state of meditation until Maitreya comes. So whether you can believe that or not, I think it's still a beautiful story. And I think I was particularly touched by this story because of the connection between Mahaprajapati and the future Buddha, Maitreya. So for me, that just makes me feel closer to her, because I feel really, really close to Maitreya Buddha. I hope I'm around when he comes too. Then we can see for ourselves whether this happens as the stories tell.